So today we shall take a look at the journey of Buddha in the process of enlightenment and after the enlightenment. But before we can begin, let's take a look at some of the few clarifications that we had last time, right? Some of the few doubts. So first and foremost, so somebody asked, right, was the term Buddha used before? And what we had said last time was that obviously when we refer to the Buddha now in the present era, we refer to Siddhartha. But now if you go to the Buddhist tradition, okay, so if you go to the Buddhist canons, the Pali canon, that is the earliest recorded teachings of the Buddha, they say that even before Gautama, there were also other Buddhas, and these Buddhas were called as the some Buddhas. Okay, so there were several ones before him who had also attained enlightenment and also who had taught the others the path of liberation. Now, again, what does Sambuddha mean? Sambuddha basically refers to a fully enlightened Buddha. Okay, and this term is basically used to refer to all those who preceded the Buddha in the previous eras. Now, this term Sambuddha comes from two words. Okay, so in Sanskrit it's basically called as Samyak, Sambuddha, whereas Samyak refers to complete or perfect, whereas Sambuddha refers to the awakened or enlightened one. Now, what is the role of these Sambuddhas? So, just as in our faith, we also have the prophets, right? So, what was the role of the prophets? Role of the prophets? Okay, to proclaim, we can say one thing. Also, they had the role of admonishing, right? So, if the people are not doing certain things right, correct them, bring them on the right track. So, we see that some Buddhas appeared in different eras, okay, when the teachings of the previous Buddha were slowly fading away or had been lost, in order to help people to rediscover once again their charism, once again their path to liberation. These Sambuddhas would appear. So this is basically, so in every epoch, every era, you would have Buddhas who would come in order to once again reorient the people towards the truth. So before Buddha also, there are several Sambuddhas. For example, a few examples let us take. There is the Kapu Sandha Buddha. We also have the Pana Kamna Buddha. And the Kasapa Buddha. So next, also I wanted to clarify once again with you all the term perception. So last time what we said is perception is something that we are able to form an image in our mind. And in simple terms, what this perception refers to is how we recognize plus understand the reality. And how we do this? We do this through our senses and our mind. Okay, so it makes us feel the world around us by interpreting what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, and what we feel. Okay, so let's take an example. For example, when you see a dog, your eyes receive the light that are reflecting of the dog's form. So, for example, if you have a dog, okay, so the rays of light reflecting from the dog are coming towards your eyes. Now your brain interprets these light forms and then gives you that information that what is there is a dog based on its shape, size and other visual cues. Okay, similarly, for example, when you recognize your friend's voice, you hear a voice and it may sound familiar. Why? Because your ears are capturing the sound waves. Then your brain goes back to the past. Okay, this particular kind of sound sounds familiar to one of my friends. There is an association that takes place and that enables you to recognize that it is your friend's voice. Okay, so basically you have the sensory input which is there. Apart from that, you also have interpretation that takes place. Then also we see that perception is subjective. Why it is subjective? It can be based also on our previous experiences. Because we see that what the brain does is, it interprets based on your past experiences. And of course we have the influence of the mind, especially when it comes to emotions, expectations, etc. Okay, and finally the last concept that I just wanted to make clear is the jhanas. Now, these are basically states of profound concentration, or we can call them mental absorption. Which one attains through meditation. So there are basically 4 stages or 4 main jhanas, each which represents a deeper meditative absorption. Okay, so first is characterized by joy and happiness. Second one we see involves tranquility, a deeper level of tranquility. The third one is marked by a kind of a mindfulness and alertness. Okay, and the fourth one is peace, tranquility, a kind of a stillness. So apart from these 4, we also have certain formless or immaterial jhanas. Now what we did last time, what were the 2 which we dealt last time? We saw we had the sphere of no thing, and you also had the neither perception or non-perception. These two come under the formless or the immaterial jhanas. Okay, so in the immaterial jhanas, you have first is the sphere of infinite space. Then you have sphere of infinite consciousness, and then you have the sphere of no-thing and perception or non-perception. Okay, so these are a few clarifications which I wanted to touch upon before we can begin today's class.
Last time, before that, sphere of negative perception or non-perception means the fourth divine state of Dharma.
Yeah, that means at that time what he had achieved. Okay, so
these four are coming under the last four?
No, these come beyond this in a way. So these are the four ones which basically are the, after the fourth one you also have few more divisions. So these come under the immaterial ones. So see, at every stage when Buddha went to a particular teacher, that was how much the teacher could give him. Okay, therefore he was not satisfied with it. So when he went to the first one, according to the first teacher, okay, the sphere of nothing was the maximum that he could offer. Then we see he goes to the second one, and the second one allows him to reach to the perception of non-perception. Then he's still not satisfied, he goes further. Okay, so this is how his journey progresses. So last time as we began, we say that as evening came, he went to the base of a maple tree. He sat cross-legged, and most importantly, he was in a way determined that he would not rise up until he had attained enlightenment. Because what we have seen last time is that this journey till this stage of his was not a very simple one. Why? Because first and foremost, we see that he was fasting, various practices of self-modification, then his realization that these are not in a way helping him to move ahead. Then we have the disappointment of those who are following him. They also leave him in disgust. And now therefore we see that in a way he is determined to achieve his goal. But as we see, there is always some kind of obstacle that comes in the way. And now we see that he faces one of his greatest obstacles, and that is Mara, or the evil one. Okay, who is said to be the tempter, also said to be the Lord of the world of passions. Okay, so kind of, if you want to imagine, you can imagine to the how we have the devil in our faith, similar to that. Okay, so now this Mara was determined by all means that he wanted to defeat the Buddha. And how could he defeat Siddhartha or Gautama Buddha? By Yeah, he wanted to hinder his progress, right? So for him, Buddha should not achieve enlightenment by all means. And therefore, we see that, yes, he wanted to prevent him, and therefore he approached him with various demonic forms. Okay, and it is said that in the various texts, Buddha states that when he was practicing, austerities, Mara approached him in various ways, saying that you are emancipated, pale, and near death. Life is better. Do some meritorious deeds.
In the Padma Sutta, Discourse on the Exertion, of the Pali Satanapada, one of the earlier texts, the Buddha states that when he was practicing austerities by the Naranjara River in Uruvala, Mara approached him, speaking such words as, "You are emaciated, pale, you are near death. Live, sir, life is better. Do meritorious deeds. What is the use of starving?" After some preliminary words, Gautama replied, "Lust is your first army. The second is dislike for higher life. The third is hunger and thirst. The fourth is craving. The fifth is torpor and sloth. The ninth is gains, praise, honor, false glory. The 10th is exalted self and despising others. Mara, these are your enemies. No feeble man can conquer them, yet only by conquering them one wins bliss. I challenge you. Shame on my life if defeated. Better for me to die in battle than to live defeated." Gautama, however, sat unmoved in meditation, supported only by the 10 Paramitas, great virtues: charity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, effort, patience, truth, determination, universal love, and equanimity, that he had perfected during innumerable past lives as a bodhisattva, Buddha to be, in order to attain enlightenment. Mara, overcome with grief, disappeared.
Okay, so we see that after having defeated Mara, he spends the rest of the night in a kind of a deep meditation under the tree. So as of now, we see that the struggles are slowly disappearing. The storm is coming to an end. And if you look at the lives of most of these great saints or religious figures, these kind of struggles, these kind of torments have been very common. For example, if you look in the life of Christ, we have the temptation in the desert, also we have the agony in the garden. Okay, then also for many saints, they also experience the dark night of the soul. So in this way, we see that for such great saints or religious figures, having these kind of battles with the evil one or with themselves was quite natural. Now, we said that he spent the night under the tree in meditation. And now there are basically three parts how he was able to achieve this enlightenment. So, in the first part of the night, we are told that he gained the acknowledgement of his former existences. Okay, so in a way, he was able to know about his past lives. Okay, in the first part of the night. Then, in the second part of the night, in a way, he was able to attain a kind of a superhuman divine eye. That is, to see the passing away and the rebirth of beings. So, as we see here, as he progresses through the night, he is reaching a kind of a deeper state of experiencing reality. So if you have a kind of a tip of the iceberg in the beginning, he's going deeper and deeper with every stage in order to know the essence of life, in order to know the essence of being. Okay, and then we see that in the last part of the night, he was able to direct his mind to the knowledge of the destruction of all defilements. Okay, so everything that basically leads us away from what is our goal, and in this way he realized the Four Noble Truths. And here it is where he said that my mind is emancipated, ignorance was dispelled, knowledge arose, and there was light. Okay, so once again, to have it repeat more clearly, mind was emancipated, ignorance dispelled, okay, science or knowledge arose, and light arose as well. So we see that at the age of 35 is where he attained enlightenment. And the night on which he basically gained this enlightenment and became a supreme Buddha, as we know, is in the month of Vesakha, that is equivalent to a month of May. And the place was Bodh Gaya. So we see that after his enlightenment, he continued to spend a few weeks in Uruvela, and here he basically was meditating on various aspects of the Dhamma that he had realized, or in other words, the doctrine that he had realized. So all that whatever he had come to realization during his enlightenment, the deeper states of reality, he was able to, in a way, kind of recognize or go much deeper and meditate on them. And now we see that he also was able to reflect and meditate on this dependent origination or the conditioned genesis. Okay, so let's take a look at the doctrine of dependent origination. So first and foremost, it views everything as relative and interdependent. That means all life is interdependent, and at the same time, in a way, it is relative. That means there is a kind of a flow we see that is taking place, but also a kind of a link reaction. Therefore, we see all our actions have repercussions on the world, and those again affect us in various ways. In today's world, all of us are facing the same experiences. We do something to the environment. Okay, so for example, let's say the destruction of the environment, which then leads to climate change, global warming, which again in turn affects our life. So in a way, we see that there is a kind of an interdependence. Now, this doctrine of dependent origination also says that there is nothing, there is no eternal, everlasting, unchanging, permanent, or absolute substance. Okay, so there is nothing that is permanent, unchanging, or absolute. Okay, such as the soul, self, or the ego, within or without man. And in this way, he was able to reflect on all these, and this reflection will enable him to arrive at the noble truths and also the eightfold path. Okay, which is.
For weeks after his enlightenment, seated under a banyan tree, the Buddha contemplated the profound truth he had realized. He thought to himself, "I have realized this truth which is deep, difficult to see, difficult to understand, comprehensible by the wise. Men who are overpowered by passion and surrounded by a mass of darkness cannot see this truth which is against the current, which is lofty, deep, subtle, and hard to comprehend." The Buddha's enlightenment was not just a moment of personal insight, but a beacon of wisdom for humanity. He understood that the path to enlightenment is challenging, requiring one to overcome desires and see beyond the illusions of the world. For students, this message is a reminder that true understanding and wisdom often lie beyond the surface. It encourages us to seek deeper knowledge, to question our surroundings, and to strive for clarity amidst life's distractions. Let the Buddha's words inspire you to pursue wisdom and enlightenment, embracing the journey with patience and determination.
So, in other words, we see that because we are, in a way, governed by our passions, we are not able to reach the truth. And therefore, it is only when these passions are kind of dealt with or overpowered, it is only then where one can arrive at the truth. So now, as he was going through all this, initially the Buddha had a bit of hesitation in order to explain the truth to others. So in a way, he was not very comfortable initially. Why? Because this is something that he had realized, and probably also he wasn't sure how it would be taken by the others. So, according to tradition, okay, so we are told that this Brahman, okay, so according to tradition, we are told that this Brahman Sambhati was one who tried to convince him, okay, and tried to tell him that it was important that he offer his wisdom and insights to the world. And it is only on his advice that the Buddha accepted his vocation as a teacher. So now the Brahman Sampati, he basically set before the Buddha a kind of an imagery of the lotus pond. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So what is this imagery of the lotus pond? So here he basically says that he told him that in a pond there are some lotuses that are under the water. There are others that have risen to the level of the water, and there are still others that are able to come out of the water. And so here we see that there are some that are submerged, others are just on the surface, not able to break through, whereas there are some that are able to break through and come out of it. Now, in other words, what he was trying to tell him is, this water refers to the ignorance, and above the water is the truth. Some people are completely buried in ignorance. There are others that have reached the surface but are not able to break through or come out of it. And there are others like you who have been able to break the shackles of ignorance and come out to experience the truth. So this was the imagery that Brahman Sampatti gave to the Buddha, and this was sufficient enough to convince him to take on his vocation as a teacher. So in this way we see that this also could refer to various ways of spiritual development in our lives. Okay, so this enabled him to proclaim the insights that he had gained. So we see that after this, after being convinced that this is now his vocation, he came across the 5 ascetics. Now, can anyone briefly remember who were these 5 ascetics? Yeah. No. He came across. He was a kind of a. See, this is according to tradition. He had an encounter with Brahman Sampatti. So, a person. Not. It is not enough. This is. He's already finished. He's reached enlightenment, and now he comes across this person. So, who were these 5 ascetics? Any idea? Okay, so there were these companions of his who were disappointed and who had left him. So on meeting that, Buddha explained to them that he was an arhat. Now what is an arhat? Is a perfect one. Okay, so in Pali it is called as arhat, the perfected one, or also it is a fully awakened one. Okay, so as we saw earlier, the Samanasa Asam Buddha. Also, he told them that he had realized the immortal Amata, and he wished to instruct and teach them the Dhamma. So, which, as we see, the teachings of the Buddha, the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So, this was the reply that he got. But Reverend Gautama, even by all that conduct, that practice, that austerity, you did not realize this supreme knowledge or this supreme state. So how can you now realize it when you live in abundance, when you have given up striving and have reverted to a life of abundance? So once again we see that there is an element of doubt in these 5 ascetics. So according to their reasoning, it is that, see, when you are practicing self-mortification, when you are doing all those austerities, Nothing happened to you. Okay, you are not able to reach this state. Okay, now you have given up all those things. You're kind of, see, when they refer to abundance here, we should not take this abundance in the literal sense. Okay, so for them it is like earlier you were fasting completely, full mortification, everything. Now that you're not doing any of those things, how can you say that you have achieved enlightenment? Because in those days, it was a very strong belief that one had to be liberated out of the body. Okay, so even in our Catholic tradition, we see that the body is something that is considered as trapping the soul. And therefore, when you look at the various kind of penances, the various kind of self-mortifications which were done, that was in order to purge oneself out of the we see the body that the person had. Now, here we see that this doubt still continues. Okay, so you have given up striving. Okay, how can you now gain enlightenment? And therefore, the Buddha's reply is even more interesting. So, once again, the Buddha denied that he had given up striving. So he says that I have not lost track of the goal. The goal still remains there, only the path has changed. Okay, so therefore, that he had not reverted to a life of abundance. He was not living in luxury. Okay, he was just doing things that were sufficient. As we saw last time, earlier the Buddha also tried to follow various teachers. At one point of time, when he realized that all these self-mortification, all these austerities were not kind of helping him, he decided to choose his own method or choose his own way of going about. And therefore, we see that he tells them, okay, this is nothing to do with abundance, I have not given up, and he asks them to listen to him. But we see that these ascetics were quite rigid in their thinking, and they were not willing to listen to him. So we see that the Buddha then questions them. Okay, so he tells them, do you remember of any time that I spoke to you anything like this before? Or did you notice this kind of wisdom, this kind of depth in my conversation? And so in this way, as he spoke to them, as he directly questioned them, they were amazed at his straightforwardness, okay, which earlier they had not experienced in him. At the same time, they also recognized the sincerity and the earnestness that he had. Okay, so basically, this is not just a matter of 1 or 2 minutes of conversation. Okay, so this was also another kind of a struggle, trying to convince them that he had achieved his enlightenment. So for example, we see that when we are in an argument with somebody who is not willing to change his opinion, it takes time, it takes perseverance, and only when they see something or recognize that this is something which is different, only then they change. So the same thing also happened here, that they realized that okay, something has happened to him, he is not the same as he was earlier. Only once they realized it was the time that they were convinced. So once they were convinced, they had a change of attitude. Their attitude was no longer the same. So they now addressed him as Reverend Gautama. Okay, so till here we shall deal for today. We'll continue the next one another time.